We can take our roof and turn it into a detailed plan from a very basic roof like this. We'll also cover some favorite resources to get quality information and a firm understanding, doing it with as many automatic elements as possible. So when we make one change, like changing the pitch of the roof, it automatically updates across all of our nodes at once. So to create this, let's go ahead and start from this. When we're labeling the roof, we can use the text label just here. If we go up to label type, then go to text/auto text, and then we click on the roof itself, we'll likely get some generic text. But if we select the text and zoom in, then double click between the text. If we go Control A to select all the text, then hit delete, we can now go up to insert auto text. So if we click this, we type in PITCH, pitch, and we double click, it should now give us the pitch of our roof. If we click outside and then click once more, it will finalize that operation. Typically, we'll then want to rotate the text to the orientation of the roof. So if we go Control E, click once in the middle, once at the right, and then spin it around just so it's vertical, holding in Shift to make sure it's 90 degrees. We've now got our pitch noted. Once we've done this once, we can just hold in the Alt key to use the eyedropper, select that label, and then from there, we can just click on our roof and it's going to automatically put that label in the other areas. We can do this with the remaining roofs really quick and easy. We'll typically also use an arrow. So if we go to, say, the polyline tool, and just at the top where it says arrowhead, we'll click on one of the arrowheads. For the size, I've got number 2. And then if I click from this point, just down past the text here, and click once, double click, I've now got my arrow. It's currently set to the wrong orientation, so I'll click the other arrowhead end because we want it to point down away from the ridge. This is also a dashed line, so we're just going to change this to a solid line. So we can now use this one that we've set up and we can duplicate it around the rest of the drawing. And I typically like to line these up with our ridge line. From here, we'll be taking a deep dive into some more of the terminology. 2 of my favorite guides when it comes to roofs that are published from manufacturers include this one from Borrell, which walks through a lot of the key terminology. So just here, we've got the ridge board at the top and all the typical timber framing. Further on into the manual, we've got architectural details, which goes from areas like a change of pitch all the way to a typical eave or even a ridge, with a variety of different examples. This one is mostly focused on tile roofs and how they're implemented in different design situations from a bunch of different angles. This is one of my go-tos for tile type installation. Now on the other side, when it comes to metal roofs, I really like the Lysart flashing guide. They cover a bunch of different areas, like when you've got a roof up against a wall, and when we're using things like apron flashing, all the way to when we've got penetrations coming up through the roof, as well as typical roof dimensions for the individual roof elements. If you're not familiar with flashing,
So we know this is roof shooting, but what's this stuff in between? This is flashing, and it's used to prevent leaks. An easier way to think about it, flashing is capping, and capping is to put a lid or cover on. There's a bunch of different types. This is barge capping, ridge capping, apron flashing, and valley flashing. Quick side note, this is called a barge board. This is barge capping because it covers the barge board. A lot of building terms are contextual to each other. Alright, back to flashing. It's also used for roof perforations like whirlybirds, vents, and skylights. It's not just used for roofs though. This is an external corner trim, used for corrugated metal sheet cladding. Well, that's cool, but what about tile and terracotta roofs? Similar concept, but you use lapping ridge, hip, apex, and barge tiles.
All right, and with that, we should have a bit of a firmer idea of what we're looking at when we've got diagrams like this open. Basically, we're trying to stop water getting into the house at where the roof sheeting meets up, which is what we're going to do next. So to create all the flashing that we see on top of the roof just here, what I typically do is I select the roof, I go Control D to drag it, and then I'll tap Control once to create a duplicate. From here, I'll type in a dimension, say 20,000, and hit enter. Just a dimension, I'll be able to easily bring it back up. So if I now scroll down till I've got that in place, if I select the roof, right click, and I go split into single plane roofs, it'll give us a warning and we can go OK. From here, if we select the roof and we go Alt G or Command G if we're on a Mac, hit escape, then select the roof again, we've got all of those roof planes cut into separate roofs. To create the appearance of flashing on top of our roof, what we're going to do, we'll select the edge of one of the roofs and we'll go offset all edges. We'll tap Control just once, which will create a duplicate of the roof. Going to type in 150, a rough dimension for the flashing, and we'll go enter. From here, we'll select the bottom of the roof that we just created, the inset one. We'll select the bottom edge and we'll drag it just out to the bottom just here. Basically, we're creating a template to cut out of the roof. So we'll now deselect that roof by hitting escape. We'll hold in Shift and tap Tab until we select the primary roof that we had just before. So from here with the roof selected, if we select the edge of the roof, and then if we go to subtract from polygon and select this one here, if we now hold in the spacebar, it's going to activate the magic wand tool. If we now click on the inside of this roof, you'll notice a little blue line pop up. If we click, it's going to cut out that portion of the roof just down below it. So if I now select this roof just here and delete it because there was essentially a template, if we go into our 3D, we'll notice that a big chunk of the roof is missing, which is perfect. This is exactly what we want because this right here is what we're going to be using as the flashing. Don't worry, it'll all make sense in a second. We'll want to repeat this process for the remaining roofs. All right, now that we've repeated that process for each of the roof planes, we'll now select all of our flashing. We'll go Control D and we'll raise it back that 20 meters that we set just before and go enter. If we pan back up, that set all the flashing over the top of the roof that we had before. Now, if we select everything, right click, and we go into our 3D, hey, there we go. We'll now have our flashing over the top of our roof, but it doesn't quite look like flashing just yet. If we now select the flashing, and in this top panel just here, if we scroll across until we get to surface, I'm going to go to paint, and I'm going to go a dark gray for this one. There we go. Now, at the moment, it's currently intersecting with our existing roof. So what I typically do is set this to, say, 10 millimeters thick, and then I raise it up until it meets the roof, and then I bump it up another, say, 10 millimeters, and go enter. This way the two elements aren't clashing. If we go back into our floor plan view, things are starting to take shape. Now, to get the roof plan to actually match the material that we've got shown here, if we select our roof and we go to floor plan and section, and we can turn on cover fills. At the moment, we've got a fill, a custom orb fill that's being used, but if we select use fill from surface just below, it will use the fill that we've got associated with that surface material. For the materials, if we go to element attributes and we go to surfaces, for this custom orb just here, we can set the fill in this setting just here, as well as the associated texture. This fill is a key piece of information because it delineates the different types of roof materials we're using. If this roof was a clip lock roof, it might look a little bit more like this, which if we go to options and we go back to the surfaces again, we've got this wide tray profile selected. As far as the textures, I've used the Skylights library, which should be available for free over on the Skylights website. I've got them loaded into pretty much every template that I use. It gives us a much wider variety of textures to use for our roof types, which means we can more accurately represent the different roofs that we're trying to show. This panel here that I've just opened up is where we can go in and select the texture that we want for the roof from the library. And as far as importing those libraries, we just go to File, Library and Objects, Library Manager. We click Add, select our textures file, go Choose, and then we should have all those textures to choose from. Now that we've got our roof material shown, typically I'll label this with some text. There we go. And like that, we've got our roof material noted. Typically I'd show most of my notation in a material legend, like this just up in the top right hand corner, so that when I change it in one place, I only have to change it in one other place, instead of going back to individual notes themselves. But that's a whole different topic, and this will check the box for now. A key element to any roof is a set of gutters. For this one, I'm going to draw them up using the wall tool. You can just go to a basic wall. If we go to the structure, make sure it's set to basic. We'll set this to, say, a solid fill white. Set a thickness of 150, so that's how deep the gutter is going to be. And we'll set a height of around about 80 mil. We'll go enter. From here, we'll hold in spacebar to activate the magic wand tool, and we'll click once. If we now go to our 3D, we can see that we've now got a representation of that gutter. Now it mightn't be to the right height, so if we select it, with grouping turned on, so if I bump this one down a little bit, it's going to look much more accurate. So anywhere where you've got a gable, you might need to go around and just make sure that's deleted. If we go back into our 2D, we've now got all of our gutters drawn in. To make it a little bit more realistic, we could use a custom profile set to something, say like a quad gutter. That way, if you get really close, you can see that it matches more accurately what the profile would actually look like. But unless we're detailing the eaves, it doesn't really matter that much. We'd also then note the gutter. Now, quad gutter is actually 125, but because of the way that we've set this up, if we just select the walls, the gutters that we set up before, and we're using that basic structure, we can then change the wall thickness back to, say, 125 and go enter. So it's really quick and easy to change the width and depth of that gutter. Speaking of labeling, typically, for the sake of clarity, I'll use the text tool here, and we'll call out the different elements of the roof. So like the ridge capping, over this side where we've got the gable, we've got the barge capping. On these corners here, we've got some hips. And lastly, we've got some valleys just over here. Now, to give us context on where the roof is placed above the actual dwelling itself, at this point, I typically grab a polyline, go over to my view map and then right click on my ground floor and show it as a trace reference. With reference, we can then see the floor below, which will then zoom in and we'll start tracing around the external wall point. We'll take it wall by wall, all the way around the dwelling, making sure to zoom in to make sure we're picking up the right points as well. And with that, we'll finish it up. We'll also want to draw in our patios as well. So using that same dashed line, we'll draw in our patio at the front as well as at the rear. So now if we turn off the trace reference, we'll have a clear indication of where the roof sits over the floor. Now to give extra utility to the lines that we've just drawn in, what I typically then do is I dimension from that line to the edge of the roof. So if we zoom in, click once on our line, click once on our roof edge, it's going to pick it up because we've got that wall just next to it. We'll double click just here and we'll click one more time. We've now got that eave dimension. From here, I'll just delete the gutter dimension and then I'll grab the text and recenter it in that space just there. We then repeat that process for the remaining eaves. Next up, we'll want to draw in the gutters. So for the gutters, I typically use an object. If we go to the settings, in this case, I've used downspout complex 26. Now what we want to try and achieve is being able to show our downpipe at its correct location on the roof plan, so lined up with the gutter, but we also want to show it in its correct location on the floor plan as well. So if we go down, we'll see that it's up against the wall in this case. So this all comes down to how we're actually showing the downpipes on our plans. So within the settings, I've currently got this shown on all stories. This means that on my site plan, these will also be showing up, which will be handy for a drainage plan if we need to do one. If we go to our settings and we go to representation and surfaces, in the 2D presentation section, I set mine to projected and we'll go okay. This might take a little experimentation and you might even need to play with the floor plan cut plane. So it's showing the projection at the correct location. With the skylights that I've used here, I've used the skylight tool. So if we go to the settings, I've used the Skylight Flat Panel 26. This should be the same in ArchiCAD 27, 28, and all the previous versions of ArchiCAD with their relevant ArchiCAD number. For mine, I've got no horizontal or vertical frame points shown, just a clean skylight. So if you've got the skylight selected, then you can just literally click on the roof and it's going to place one into the roof space, which we can then select and reorientate to wherever we need it. Now, as far as the labeling goes, typically once we've placed it in, if we go up to the top and we scroll all the way across to the right, we have ID and properties, which I've labeled this one Sky01, so that we can automatically label these. We can go to the label tool, and instead of going to text, auto text, we go to property label 26. So this way, when we go to click on the actual skylight itself, it's just going to use this parameter from the ID and properties. Now this process is the same for the downpipes as well. So I'll use that label and I can just click on the downpipe and it's going to show DP, which if I select the downpipe, you'll notice that over in the ID and properties, it shows D.P. For the solar system just over here, this is an object. So if we go to its settings and we type in solar, this one here will pop up, which we can then adjust the height, the size, and whether it's showing supports or not, as well as the angle. And again, we typically label this for clarity. Now, a special little extra detail that I've shown just for the sake of presentation for the video are these fills, which are just linear gradient fills, which I've got it set as blue fading out to a background pen. As always, this file, along with every single tutorial file, is now available over on the Patreon. If you like the detail we went into today on this video, I think you'll love this video just over here. Go on and check it out.